In the strange and terrible history of the witch, perhaps no incident is more startling or more hotly debated than an event which took place in an obscure village in Massachusetts, a phenomenon which still haunts scholars with unanswered questions. During the Salem witch trials of 1692, in a few terror-filled months, nearly 200 people would be condemned as witches. 14 women and 5 men would be hanged on Salem's Gallows Hill. How did the witch hunt of 1692 begin, and why here? The settlement of Salem was named after the holy city of Jerusalem. But here, the Puritans had found no land of milk and honey. Salem had endured 20 years of Indian wars. It was racked by internal pressures, land disputes, and deep religious divisions tore at the struggling community. Though the Puritans clung to their strict religion, it offered little comfort. Eternal damnation was an ever-present threat, and the world of demons seemed as real as the hard New England soil.
People living in the 17th century tended to believe that most things could be explained supernaturally. If you stumped your toe, or if your cow fell sick, or if your food went rotten before it should have done, there must surely be some kind of supernatural explanation for this.
Ironically, scholars believe that the witch hysteria of 1692 began in the home of a Puritan minister, the Reverend Samuel Parris. Even more surprisingly, the event which sparked the ensuing terror was a child's game. It started when the Reverend Parris's daughter, Elizabeth, and his niece, Abigail Williams, were playing a game with the household slave, Tituba.
They had been using a primitive crystal ball. This consisted of a glass of water with a raw egg broken into it. And then they would gaze into it, ask a question, and hope that images would come out or appear in the water. Well, at one of these experiments, one of the girls believed that instead of seeing the features of a wealthy, attractive future husband, she saw instead a coffin.
Besieged by apparitions of death, the girls were soon thrown into convulsions. Within days, 9 other girls in Salem were simultaneously stricken with the same mysterious affliction. Under pressure from the Reverend Parris, the girls revealed the names of 3 witches whom they said had caused their possession. Tituba, the household slave, Sarah Good, a poor beggar woman, and Sarah Osborne, a widow rumored to have had an illicit affair with one of her servants. All 3 were outsiders in the community, easy targets for suspicion. What motivated the girls to make their astonishing accusations? What was the source of their possession?
There are 2 possible explanations of the girls' fits at Salem. One is that they were experiencing some kind of psychological malady, that they were hysterical in one way or another. The other explanation is that they were being deliberately deceptive, that they were practicing some kind of fraud.
It may have been, at least on the part of the young girls who claimed to be bewitched, a real form of social release. They were so tightly controlled, and their status in patriarchal Puritan households was so marginal that this was a way of becoming the center of attention.
Although it might seem incredible in modern times, the accusations made by the possessed girls in Salem were taken seriously by the local authorities. They set up a tribunal to investigate the charges. What compelled the local magistrates to convene these extraordinary trials? Surprisingly, some scholars believe that the trials may have concealed a political agenda.
One common explanation has been that the parents and relatives of the girls used the accusations as a way to attack their enemies. And it's extremely striking that most of the accusers came from one side of the factional dispute and most of the accused from the other side.
Sparked by the Salem trials, the hysteria spread to 24 outlying villages. By September 1692, the jails overflowed with nearly 200 accused witches. 27 were found guilty and 19 were hanged. After execution, their bodies, forbidden a proper Christian burial, were left to rot in the open air on Salem's Gallows Hill. Why did the witch trials finally end? Some scholars believe the trials ended quickly because the witch hunters accused one victim too many, the wife of the governor of Massachusetts. With the power structure of New England seemingly threatened, the leaders saw to it that the trials were abruptly stopped. What ultimately brought the terrors of the burning times in the Old and New World to an end? It remains an intriguing mystery. Some scholars believe that the advent of science may be a decisive factor.
The witchcraft trials come to an end for many reasons, but I think a large part of the reason was that society moved away from its fear of the supernatural and the unexplainable. You curse your neighbor's cow and the cow dies the next day and suddenly you're a witch. Well, as different explanations for why the cow bloated up and died become available, the identification of witchcraft as the source of all evil in society will begin to diminish, and it eventually will disappear.
And yet, strangely, despite the growth of science, the belief in witchcraft was far from over.